Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to localize both static and dynamic text in Unity. So as you see, I have this small project with just a button and a counter here, and every time I press this button, the counter goes up. And so at the moment it is just in English, but I'd like this to also be in Spanish too, and being able to switch between that. So to do that, I'm going to go and get the Unity Localization package. So if you go to Package Manager, click on Unity Registry, and you just type in Localization, it should come up and you can press Install. I already have it installed here. So what we're going to do next is I create a folder called Localization because you're going to have a lot of files related to localization. So I recommend making another folder for this. And once you have that, right click, Create, Localization settings. So let's just put that in here. And then in your localization settings, active localization settings, you're just going to want to press yes because you're going to be using these. You can press add locale, and then you can select all the languages you want to localize to. So I'm going to select English and I'm going to select Spanish. And I'm going to hit add locales, add them in the localization folder again. So you'll see these pop up here. And so now that you have these, we can go to Window, uh, where is it? Window, Asset Management, yes. Asset Management, Localization Tables. So we open this window, and this is where we're going to put all of our translations into. So I'm just going to put it right here. And then as it says, we currently have no tables. A string table, or like any other type of table, is where you put all your localizations. So I'm going to hit New Table, and these are like UI elements. So I'm going to call this localization table UI. It's going to be a string table collection because we're translating strings, and I'm going to hit create. I'm going to put in localization again. So now we have this. We have the main table, and we also have the specific ones for the English and Spanish. But anyways, now that we created this, if we wanted to open it, like if we had multiple and we wanted to open it again, we would just in the inspector hit open in table editor, but we already have it open. So right here, we got this. I'm going to hit preload so that when it's first getting it on the scene start, you're not going to have like a brief second where there's no translated text yet. And so now I'm going to create an entry. First, we'll translate this static text, the press me thing. So English, press me, and we'll have to give it an ID. We'll call this button because it's a button, and then like presionarme for Spanish. And so now, if we go to our button, we go to the text, we right click the text component, localize. Down here on the bottom, it's going to add a localized string event, and it's going to set up this already for us. This is basically just saying uh, when we change the language, so if we change it between English and Spanish, we're going to update the string, so this text. And so what we're going to update it to, we set right here, string reference, we're going to click on it, and button is the name of our localization entry. So now, if we run this, you can see right here we have a little thing to change the language. So this is in English, this is in Spanish. So nice, that translates. However, we still have this text to translate, and this is a bit different because, as you see, this number changes. And so currently, if we look at the code for this, the code for the counter is very simple. It's just every time the button's pressed, we call this, we increase the counter, and then we update the text. But we set the text in a script. So the question is, how can we get the correct localization from a script in order to update it that way? Well, to do this, what we can do is let's first make another localization entry, and we'll call it counter. And so, what do we call it right now? Times pressed. So we can do times pressed. And then to add a way that we can add like a parameter in here, so our number, we can put like this, these, and then we'll put 0 to denote that if we pass arguments into this string, which you'll see later, this will be the first argument, the 0th one. And so for Spanish, tiempos presionados, 0. And then, so for this one, because we're setting the text in a script, we don't have to bother with adding one of these localized string events. Just what we're going to do is let's go to our script here, press counter, and instead of hard coding this, we're going to want to get this from the table, the string table. And so the way I like to go about this is I create a separate static class called localization handler, which I use in order to just easily get all of the translated strings and also catch the string tables so that you're not unnecessarily getting them each time. And so I already have created here a static class called localization handler. Notice it's not mono behavior or anything, it's just static class. And so this way, it's very easy to access from anywhere in your project. And so the first thing I create is just a dictionary corresponding the table name to the string table object. So right now we just have one string table, UI, but you might have a lot of these. Some people like to just have one string table that they have everything in. But personally, I like to have multiple string tables corresponding to like what's what. I just find it easier to manage. So if you had a lot, you would imagine you might be accessing a bunch of different string tables. And so it's nice just to store them in a dictionary like this. And so in order to actually get the string table, because this is a static class, the way we're going to get it is we're going to use the Unity localization stuff. And so they have, you can just do localization settings dot string database dot get table and pass in the table ID to get, so if we do localization settings dot string database dot get table and we pass in UI, for instance, we're going to get a reference to this string table. Uh, Okay, and so this method allows us to get a string table, a reference to a string table directly from here by just the ID. So if we passed in the string UI corresponding to this table, we would then get uh, a reference to this table, and we would be able to translate stuff from it. And so when we get this, it will get specifically what the current localization one is. So if our language was English, we would get like UIEN, so we would get the English translations. And if our language was Spanish, we would get the Spanish translations. And so it's inefficient if we get our table like this every single time we want to translate a string. So instead, what we do is we catch our accesses to these tables into our dictionary. And so that's what this method I have here is, just get table. What it does is it will first check if we've already accessed this table, and if we have, we just get it from the dictionary. But here's the thing. We can't just get it from the dictionary if it's catched every time, because if the language changes, then we're going to have to re-get the table since when we do get table from DB, we get specifically like the current languages table. So we get the English table or the Spanish table. So what I do right here is I check if we have not gotten it. So if we don't have this string table in our dictionary yet, what we're going to do is we're going to add into our dictionary the table. But also, in the case that our localization has changed, so if we do tables ID and we get our string table, we can then do locale identifier, and that would be like EN if our language was English when we got it, or like ES if it was Spanish. And we can just check, is this not equal to the current localization, like the selected localization? And if it's not, we're just going to re-get it again using our get table from DB thing. And then once we've gotten it, we have our updated table, we can just return it from the dictionary. And so that will get our current string table that's of the requested ID. And so once we have this table, we're able to get a string entry from it. So I have these two methods right here. And so let's look at this. Basically, we pass in the ID of the string table, so like UI, and then we pass in the ID of the translation entry. So if we go here, counter is the one we're going to want to use now. What we do is we get our table, and then we do dot get entry to get the current entry of ID, so counter. And then we do dot get localize string in order to get the actual translation from our entry. And so you see here we pass in args. And so that's like here we have this 0. So that's saying put the 0th argument into this string. And we can pass in null as our arguments if there's like no needed arguments. For instance, if we were getting this, this has no arguments, so we could just do get localize string and pass in nothing. And so we see here, I also have a get entry method, which does not accept any arguments into it, and it just passes in null, and that will just get the localized string without any arguments in it. However, our counter does have one argument, the current count. So we are going to want to pass in that. So now that we have this, and I don't use it in this project, but another method which can be very useful is a has entry thing, which just checks, does the entry exist? And we can do this just by getting the entry and checking that it's not null. So that might be useful for you. But now that we have the localization handler, we can go to press counter. And instead of hard coding this, what we can do is we can reference our localization handler. And since everything in here is static, we can just do localization handler dot get entry, our static method, pass in UI because that's our table name, counter because that's our localization entry name, and then as an argument, we only have one argument, and that's the current count. So we just pass it in. And so right here, you see this is a params kind of list. So we can just pass in any extra arguments just like that. We don't have to pass in a list, but you can also, or a array. Yeah, we can just pass it in like that. And so we pass in the counter here. And so now that we're doing this, every time we update text, it will get the currently localized string. And so if we try this out, let's go here. Let's go to game. It's working in English. We switch to Spanish. Okay. So it does change when we update it. You would probably want to also put in a check for if the language changes and then update your text then, because currently we're not doing that. But as you see, we are able to get the translated version from our script using this. So anyways, I hope that helps you. Personally, when I was looking for stuff on this, the Unity getting started stuff doesn't have anything on accessing localization entries from scripts, so that's why I felt like making this. So hopefully this is helpful for you as well. Anyways, have a good day. Bye-bye.